And welcome. Thank you for joining us once again to Tea with Myrtis, part of our Art Salon series, where we make great efforts to help bring knowledge and understanding to the world of contemporary art. And this afternoon, we're here to celebrate, recognize, and acknowledge the beautiful exhibition revealing the African presence in Renaissance Europe, the contemporary response, and the artist and the curator who also assisted in making this show happen. This exhibition is a result of a rare partnering between an art gallery and museum, and a historic event for Galerie Myrtis and the Walters Art Museum. This collaboration resulted in two provocative exhibitions which investigate the roles of Africans in Renaissance Europe. 8 artists, influenced by works featured in the Walters Art Museum's exhibition revealing the African presence in Renaissance Europe, collate modern culture to interpret the roles of Africans serving as diplomats, merchants, slaves, and rulers through an aesthetic rooted in Black cultural heritage. As in the tradition of African music, artists of the Renaissance period, Africans of the Renaissance period, sent forth their ancestral spirits to extend the ancient call, eliciting a contemporary response from their descendants, whose compelling works address issues of class, identity, and race, echoing the lives of the past while speaking to the present. Today, joining us are artists Maya Freelon Asante, Jeffrey Kent, and Amy Sherald from Baltimore, Jia Richmond-Edwards from Silver Spring, Maryland, and Victor Ibach from Washington, D.C. Additionally, I'd like to acknowledge artists who were not able to join us, and that would be Jules Arthur from Brooklyn, New York, Nathaniel Donnet from Houston, Texas, and Mario Andreas Robinson from Keyport, New Jersey. Those artists are represented by the co-curator of the exhibition, and that is Amy Morton of Morton Fine Art in Washington, D.C. And additionally, I would like to extend a special thank you to Dr. Joni Spicer, the curator of Renaissance and Baroque art at the Walters Art Museum, for supporting the collaboration and serving as the exhibition advisor. And I worked with Dr. Spicer for a little over a year, attending meetings and listening to her speak about the importance of the exhibition that the Walters was about to install. And upon attending a meeting, she was doing a presentation and about the exhibition being that forthcoming, and I just posed the question, would you consider allowing a collaboration between Galerie Myrtis and the Walters and allow contemporary artists to explore these issues? And she embraced the idea immediately, and I really am grateful to her for doing that. Museums don't normally extend themselves to exhibitions and relationships with, especially contemporary art museums. So this is a rare occasion for us both, and I hope we've set a precedence. Because what it does, it allows both of us to demonstrate the relevance of what it is that the contemporary artists are doing and what the Renaissance artists have done. So I'd like to begin by showing you just a brief clip of a video of a meeting that the artist and Amy and I had with Dr. Spicer. Tech support.
So one was when poets are writing about, the ideal beauty is a blonde. Oh yes, oh yes. So this artist, mid-16th century artist who works with the court in France, he did this. He did a series of these plaques of the so he would want to have shown her as the ideal of beauty within that society. So you see all kinds of pictures as being blonde, where it makes no sense. There can't have been that many blondes in the, an Italian or like an Italian the 60s. And why did you use this image selected? Well, because Ibach is a very important person coming from Africa in the 1500s. And I'm glad you asked that question, because one of the things that we want to show in the exhibition is that, first of all, Africa itself was multi-ethnic. And Europeans know what it is. So you will have images like this, which we have in the book by a very famous architect of the other time, show, which is really as good as it gets of this period in terms of the sense of the scale. You have a little entry there. I mean, you knew that there were, you knew something a little bit more. You knew that it was actually, building blocks that wasn't smooth. But here, this is a kind of interesting little image here. That's the Sphinx. To bring up the issue of how rare it is to actually depict somebody who is specifically, in other words, in a situation who is enslaved, that has some sort of slave collar or something like that on, because it's just not a subject. Yes.
That should be the area for the senior Ethiopia, I suppose, where the Nile comes all the way down to even pre-Christian, the Ethiopians, they did not live in the Bible as a Syrian. So
yes.
We talk about Ethiopian Europe and so on.
Exactly. Oh, he's in the show. He's in the show. He's in the show. And he is so cool. Oh, I'm so glad. I'm so glad you can watch him already. Yes. I prefer him on the Ethiopian chamber. He represents Don Francesco Liloa, who was the leader of a community of escaped African slaves in South America. But here, this is the earliest from the 1520s, and what inspired other paintings is that here you have a woman of the aristocracy who sort of advertises her riches, as it were, by showing herself not only beautifully dressed in silks, etc., and an elaborate sort of headpiece, but also with her black a portrait here of this black woman who lived in Milan in the late 16th century is just, to my mind, an amazing portrait that really brings out this incredibly sort of sense of presence of her part, but also the kind of irony of her expression. I find that astonishing.
So as you see, that was a 2-hour meeting. That was a 2-hour meeting of real education, especially on my behalf, because I have not studied Renaissance art or the culture per se. And so Dr. Spicer, who is a walking encyclopedia of information, really enlightened us all. And of course, the artists had much to contribute to the dialogue. So we're going to begin with each of the artists providing us with a brief presentation of their work. And I'm going to start by introducing Maya Freelon Asante. Maya was born in Houston, Texas, and has been hailed by the International Review of African American Art as an artist to watch. She is an award-winning visual artist who has been influenced and mentored by artistic visionaries Emma Amos, Faith Ringgold, exploring of the boundaries of mixed media. Asante infuses vibrant tissue paper with printmaking, photographs, collage, and sculpture to create an array of color-saturated imagery, which has been praised by Philadelphia City Paper as joyous and spectacular. She is was awarded a residency at Skowhegan School of Painting and Sculpture in the summer of 2006. She received, and during so she received acclaim from Boston News Network television station and international poet laureate Maya Angelou, who stated she observes and visualizes the truth about the vulnerability and power of the human being. In 2007, Maya graduated from the School of the Museum of Fine Arts in Boston and began teaching at Morgan State University and Towson. And her accolades go on, but currently, some of her career highlights are one in which Ubuntu, one of the large installation pieces that she created, was purchased by the State Department and has become a permanent piece at the Embassy of Madagascar. And Maya was flown there to install the work. Recently, as of last night, I received a video. She's featured in a video production, Arroyo production, and which will be featured at Art Basel, Miami this year. And she's in the Material Girls exhibition, which traveled from the Reginald Lewis Museum to Spelman University. So Maya, please join us in talking about your art.
Thanks, Myrtis. I didn't even know I did all that.
Yeah, that's the short bio.
What an amazing opportunity to be here with all of you. Thank you so much for coming. Thank you, Myrtis, for hosting this and having the vision to think of such an exciting exhibition. I've never heard of an exhibition where we're responding directly to artwork that was created so long ago. So I feel really privileged to be a part of this. That meeting with Dr. Spicer was amazing. Like Myrtis said, it was 2 hours long, and she was that intense the whole time. Just getting so excited. I love people who are passionate about what they do, and she was definitely passionate. If you haven't seen the exhibition yet, you need to get out to the Walters and see it because they correlate really beautifully. It's kind of fun to start here and go there and then come back and bounce back and forth. During the lecture, as you can see, I was pulled to this image because it was created by an artist that hadn't actually been to see the pyramids of Giza. And I thought, wow, that's interesting. So they got the Sphinx she was telling us. They thought that she was just a bust. They didn't know that it was a lion's body under her because there was sand covering this monument at that time. And there was a lot of confusion about the height of the pyramid. You couldn't get the scale of how massive they were. But in this time, obviously there was no internet, the encyclopedias weren't detailed, and you had to trust what the explorers went, and then they came back with information verbally. And this is a document of the Sphinx to the left and what a pyramid would look like, and they put a door there, but you couldn't really get the scale of that. And so I created this image working at Morgan State University using their large format printers, was able to modify the image, print it on archival paper, and then do a monoprint on top of that. That's what you see, the vibrant color here. It's called Do You See What I See? And it's a play on thinking about where those people were, who saw what you brought back, and what that meant. And I thought about, when I was creating this work, what it would mean, what those colors looked like at that time, and how we don't have access, obviously, to color printer, black and white printer, anything, just the hand and the sketches of artists at that time in the Renaissance. And so it was a spiritual process to bring these bright and vibrant colors of now and put them into a document that is so ancient and beautiful and also kind of misguided at the same time. And I'll go to the next one. The next one is called Actual versus Factual. She talked a lot about map making and how when European explorers were traveling Africa, they had to take the Nile, and sometimes they couldn't get that far down because either they were unwelcome or the charts weren't passed yet. And so you can see to the left, the border got kind of messed up. People didn't really know what was where. You can see actually on this piece, you can kind of look through the color and see where they thought Asia was, where they thought parts of Africa were, and it was all messed up. And I thought about what is actual versus factual. And I took a stencil before I did a monoprint on this piece, manipulated and printed on the same process as the first one. And I wanted to, so you can see, it says factual backwards here, actual forwards, factual backwards that way, and actual this way. You might not see that if you just walk by it, or you might see a few letters, but this is supposed to be a map of the world. And when I'm teaching, one of the first questions I ask my students are, okay, tell me a fact, one fact. And I go through the process of breaking down what that information means. For instance, a border, or a conquest of a nation, or a country, or a continent, and how we put value and ideas onto different places and people, and then we make facts up about them. But if we don't challenge them and have the opportunity to do that, there can be some confusion, which is why some of the letters are backwards. So I thought that was really interesting to have a map that turns out to be totally different than the way that we see the world today, and it's about who is creating the map, and to have the opportunity to explore and open up those ideas as a descendant of perhaps some of the people who were involved in this map and touch this map. I think that's pretty amazing. So we're going to do questions later, right? Yes. Okay, that's all I have for now.
I've asked that Amy Morton introduce her artist, and she's going to introduce Victor.
I'd just like to introduce Victor Ekpuk. For those of you who are unfamiliar with him, he's a Nigerian-born artist, internationally renowned, has been shown all over the world, is in the permanent collection of Smithsonian Museum of African Art, as well as many other accomplishments. And I know you have two pieces you'd like to speak to today, both Ethiop and Union of the Pope Clement VII and Simonetta di Colleregio. So I would like to hand it over to you so you get to speak to both of those pieces.
Thank you, Amy. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to this talk. When Amy brought up the question about this project with the museum, if I wanted to be a part of it, and I sort of went through it, and I was actually really thrilled to be about the idea, because it's an idea that I've been working on. Actually, I produced some work based on this idea called the slave narratives, of which one of the very first piece I made is now in the collection of the National Museum for African Art. So I thought that this project would give me more insight, because the project I'm working on is actually based on research. So it will give me more insight into the history of the transatlantic slave trade and trans-Saharan slave trade as well. In this project, I'm looking at slavery from both ends, the Africans and the Europeans' involvement. So on getting to this project, I attended the talk by Dr. Spicer, and she was going through the slides. This head of a slave really stood out for me. And I wanted to explore that. Basically, as you can see, my work is basically inspired by writing systems in Nigeria that uses symbols to represent concepts. The aesthetic philosophy of that art form is that to reduce form or idea to their essence using symbols and graphic, So that's how I usually approach my work. And so I decided to go and explore how this head that I thought was, even though it was a slave collar around his neck is standing up so proud and not bowed down. So I made, I'm going to read it from my artist statement because sometimes I don't memorize these things. So the very first, as I was going through this research, I came across another person of African descent who had actually made it to the high echelons of the European society. He was a playwright called Afonso Alvarez from Portugal. When he was challenged by another playwright about his background and so on, being a mother, a child of a slave mother and so on, he made a statement that says, "My color does not disfigure my honor and wit." She showed he was very proud, was comfortable with the color of the skin. As at 1500s, this is when it happened. So basically my statement was that this exhibition is layered with history, memory, meaning. For me personally, it's also a personal story of my experiences as a black person, that these layers are summed up in the head of the black slave that was produced in 1560s to the 90s. This object, which man with the manacled neck and unbowed head, has inspired my creation of painting Ethiop. Now, Ethiop is a Renaissance description of a black African. Not Africans from the north, which are lighter skinned, but further down south, and Ethiopians. I guess that's where they derived the name Ethiopians from. It explores the history, relationships, experiences, and conditions of being described as black, being black, and being black African. The layers of meaning explored in Ethiopia also finds expression in, there's a second piece that I've made called The Union of Pope Clement VII and Simonetta di Caravaggio. I was sort of interested in this story because then again, I'm also using layers of meanings and symbols. There's a lot of symbols in this work which we'll talk about during the discussion. The Union of Pope Clement VII investigates the relationship between Pope Clement VII from the Medici family and a black slave woman, Simonetta. Both were progenitors of Alessandro de' Medici, called Il Moro, the Moor. The Duke of Florence, he was the Duke of Florence and Penne, 1530 to 1537. I was saying that through the use of symbols, this painting also explores this union as a metaphor for the relationship between, it's a complex relationship between Europe and Africa. We will discuss that as time for discussion. But thank you.
Next, I'd like to introduce Jeffrey Kent. Jeffrey was born in Boston, Massachusetts, and currently lives and works in Baltimore, Maryland. He's the founder of the Sub-Basement Artist Studios, which reflects his commitment to communicating ideas through creative expression and his dedication to community service. Jeffrey founded the studio in 2003. And he received his MFA from MICA. And currently, a couple of his career highlights are that his series, Henrietta Lacks, Transparent Sea, is featured in the exhibition From Here to Infinity, currently being held at the American Center for Physics. Jeffrey?
Thank you, Myrtis. Thank you all for coming. It's a pleasure being a part of this great collection of artists, very talented. I want to thank you for inviting me to be in this exhibition, and thanks to the Walters Art Gallery for bringing this subject to Baltimore. The work that I had some notes, but I guess I'm going to just do like everyone else. The works that I chose to do for this exhibition kind of plays into a lot of the work that I do in general. What inspired me about this work and some of the research that I did to get ready for this work is perceptions of Africans and sort of one of the things that inspired me from what you just said about the way that truth is determined from the past. And that's one of the things that really embodies my work, is hypocrisy and oxymorons and questioning authority and questioning what is the truth. And so this particular work is a great example of my humor and satire. This particular painting with the zebra camel speaks to the fact that if history books told us that camels were striped, we would all believe that. And a lot of my work has to deal with perceptions of what we see and what we're told, what we get from the news, and how the news sends us their perceptions that they want us to get. The water bottle and the slave woman, and there's a character that appears in all of these paintings, which I use as an icon for this series, is this little mannequin of this high-end fashion store in Sicily in 2009 when I went there. There weren't many colored people there in Sicily when I was there. And the only time I did run across people of color, they were trying to clean your windows or trying to help you park your car. But there's this high-end fashion boutique in this high-end part of Palermo, Sicily, which is the capital of Sicily, that had this complete storefront full of mannequins in this high-end gear, and all of the mannequins were black. And I found that very interesting because of what I just explained to you before. So that kind of explains perceptions, why I use this term, perceptions of Africa, and how I use my research and my work. This kind of plays into the exact same story, where you have this painting of these Africans with their jewelry and their uniforms in this particular case. And what I think about, as a matter of fact, one of the things I took down, wrote as a note in my thinking of things I wanted to say, is I remember growing up in the 60s believing that Africans had bones and carried spears, because in cartoons, that's what we were told. And so, that was great, go on and on. So, this kind of explains, this is kind of the story right here about the perception of Africa and how stories are told and how we get the information.
Next, I'd like to introduce Jia Richmond-Edwards. Jia was born in Detroit and studied painting and drawing at Jackson State University, and recently she graduated with her MFA from Howard University. Jia moved on to teach elementary, middle, and high school students while developing her own unique style of mixed media portraiture. She primarily paints women and is influenced by childhood memories and the complex lives of the women in her life. Recent career highlights. She is currently being featured at the Delaware Art Museum as part of the Centennial Juried Exhibition there, curated by Margaret Winslow. She is in this exhibition. She was a recent show that just ended in New York, was To Be Young, Gifted, and Black in the Age of Obama, curated by Camille Buer. And just trying to think, there's other things. Oh, yes, we're also celebrating the fact that the State Department just purchased It Could Be a Sad Story, which is going to the Dakar Cinema. Jia.
Hello, everyone. I would like to first thank Myrtis and Amy and Dr. Spicer for coming up with this great concept for exhibition. And I would like to say how honored I am to be in the show with such excellent artists whose careers I've been following for some time now. So thank you. When everyone was meeting this summer with Dr. Spicer, I was in Detroit doing a residency. And it was my first time going to Detroit since leaving in 2000, but being there more than 2 or 3 days. And so I did get the video, but what was really great is the DIA is in Detroit, the Detroit Institute of Art, and they have an excellent Renaissance collection there. So the works that I created for this exhibition was both inspired by the work in the DIA, but also being back in Detroit, because being in Detroit, I have really mixed emotions being there, because, you know, Detroit is really struggling right now. And so, not necessarily these works I'm going to present, but the works that's on this wall, if you look at them, you can see that they're a little brash, and that sort of exemplifies my sort of frustration that I had with being in the city. So this piece, Wings Not Meant to Fly, was actually created prior to this exhibition, or before I was even in this exhibition. And what's really awesome is when I first had the first idea that I had in my head was I want to really investigate the lives of, you know, the African women during the Renaissance. But I felt that there was a lack of information, very limited information. And I even talked to Dr. Spicer about it, and she said not only is it challenging to find like in-depth information on African women, but women in general during that time. And so, if anyone is familiar with my work, my work is mainly autobiographical, not necessarily about my life, but about the women in my family. I feel that the women in my family, just because of their lifestyle choices, that they were really obscured by society. And so, looking at this piece, for instance, Portrait of an African Slave Woman, we don't know much about this woman that beyond her being a slave. And again, I felt that because their stories and lives were so obscured just by looking at these paintings, it sort of correlates really well with my work, because again, it's sort of sense of invisibility, hence my black on black pieces as well. And so Wings Not Meant to Fly is just about the expectations of being a black woman. For instance, with my family. So my family were, unfortunately, my mother and aunt were drug addicts, but if someone was to look at them on the street, you wouldn't expect much from them. And so this is what this piece sort of represents. And even again, looking at this slave woman, you're not going to expect that much from her. So this one. This piece, it could be a sad story. Again, this was created prior to this exhibition. But again, it falls along the same lines of this sense of obscurity. You don't know much about her story, and again, this is more about my family. But one of the things that I really enjoy about this piece is the ambiguous expression that she has. You don't know if she's upset, or you don't know if she's kind of, you know, in her deep thought or whatnot. And so the title of this piece is, It Could Be a Sad Story, because, you know, it could be a sad story, or maybe not. It's probably a wonderful story. And again, while doing this exhibition, I began to examine how did the Renaissance influence me or how does it influence me as an artist? And one of the things is definitely the opulence and this sort of idolized version of beauty. And if most of my figures that I create, all the women sort of look similar. And you know, that's one of the traits of the Renaissance. And that's about it.
Yes, and I made an attempt to feature Jamia's black on black pieces in the PowerPoint, but because they're black on black, they did not cooperate with my efforts, so we had to go with the other two paintings. But the black on black works are absolutely brilliant, and we really do love them. Next, I'd like to introduce Amy Sherald. Amy was born in Columbus, Georgia, and she attended Clark Atlantic University, where she earned her Bachelor's of Art in Painting. While attending Clark in Atlanta, she became an apprentice to Dr. Arturo Renzi, who was her painting instructor at Spelman College. She was a participant of the Spelman College International Artists in Residence program at Portobello, Panama. And she also assisted in installing and curating shows in the Museo de Arte Contemporáneo.
Contemporary Museum of Art.
Yeah, I should have just gone with the English version, but I can see my Spanish is really rusty now. She received her MFA from the Maryland Institute College of Art. She has done several residencies, one in Norway, another in China, and recently, not recently, but in 2011, she was a juror for the pick of the New American Paintings Edition 88. Juror's pick, I'm sorry, she was not the juror, she was the juror's pick. So I'm trying to go through these briefly because they're long and very prestigious acknowledgments that you should receive. She was recently accepted into the permanent collection of the National Museum of Women in the Arts in Washington, D.C. And a mural project she completed this summer was in Aruba. And we'd also end on the note that Brian Gumbel, the television personality person, recently acquired one of her pieces.
Wow, this is always intimidating. I think about when I was in the second grade and I had decided I wanted to be an artist. And I always had the choice to either go out to recess or stay in and draw. And I would always stay in and draw because I was shy and I just preferred to be by myself. So had I known what I was signing up for, I probably would have been a librarian right now. Because every time I give an artist talk, I'm like, God. So you all look great naked, just want to say that. And I also am honored to be here with Victor and Maya and Jamia and Jeffrey and working with Myrtis and Amy, and thank you all for coming. So I guess I'm going to give some background information on my work. I'm going to try not to use my notes. I think it was easy for me to respond to this exhibition because of the work that I'm doing now. I'm dealing with aspects of role-playing and performance and identity. And so I'm kind of coming at it from the back end. I'm coming at it from being born in the South and being raised and going to all-white schools and my mother dropping me off in kindergarten and saying, talk this way, don't do this, just, teaching me how to assimilate into this environment. And so it was interesting for me to go back and look at the beginnings of what the concept of blackness was and the interactions with the Europeans, with the Africans, and how, because of those interactions, without those interactions, words like civil, what it meant to be civilized and all those things came into play because they were able to encounter the opposite of what they thought they were. So that concept was interesting to me. So, and again, I feel as if in present day, my experiences of going back to Georgia and having to live there for 3 years, I experienced myself, I got to think about how I grew up, and I got to think about, what they call in sociology code switching and how we interact with each other. So when I thought about this work, I thought about how, I guess, in the 14th, 15th century, maybe it wasn't blackness, it was called exotic or other, but how that began to come into existence and how it existed inside of all the things that were happening. Because from the reading that I did, there were freed slaves and there were slaves that were still enslaved, and so how did they interact with each other? Or there was one portrait that's in the exhibition that they're not sure whether it's he's a Moor, but he's dressed completely in, I guess what you would call European Renaissance attire. But they said that because of the way that the gloves fit his hand, you could tell that they were made for his hand, and that's something that only the wealthy had. So had he completely assimilated into European culture, or we don't really know the backstory on a lot of the work that we see. So welfare queen here. This piece I had actually started before we were asked to participate in the exhibition, but I really felt like it fit into the exhibition. I was playing around with the idea of creating archetypes that existed outside of a historical dominant narrative, and a lot of my portraits are exactly that. I wanted to try to deconstruct and experience myself outside of what American blackness is, but now I guess we're talking about a different kind. But so this is an image of a queen, and it's a portrait of Laura de Diante. Just the idea of capturing and framing and portraiture, and how the idea of being able to capture an image, and that because that image is the way it is, it's carried historically, and you kind of like interpret people based off of these kinds of things. I mean, the same thing happens with photography. So let's see, and then the next one, Grande Dame Queenie. She's one of my favorite. I had a lot of fun with this one. I learned a lot about how a lot of Africanism found its way into European culture, like things like drop earrings. They weren't wearing drop earrings, so when you see the girl with the pearl earring, it's because they had begun to adorn themselves like the Africans adorn themselves. And so I decided to use bright colors and stripes in this painting. I did some research on the history of stripes and found out in the 14th and 15th century that it was kind of seen as a transgression to wear stripes, and people that wore stripes were marginalized. And so this also plays into the idea of assimilation, like, is she performing affluence? Is she being dressed this way because she's somebody's slave? And she's being shown off, and like what aspects of her identity did she maintain, once she became a part of European culture? And it was also interesting what Jeffrey said about the zebra. Europeans said that zebras were white with black stripes, and the Africans said they were black with white stripes. So I thought that was interesting too. So yeah, I think that's it.
All right, I'd like to now turn over the floor to Amy, who's going to give us a little background on her 3 artists who were not able to attend.
Just bear with me because I'm going to be jumping through the role of curator and artist, so I'm going to try to differentiate whose voice I'm speaking in so that it's clear. So the first image I'm going to talk about is by Jules Arthur, who's New York based. Unfortunately, he's in New York today, so he couldn't be here. But he's an artist who studied a lot in painting, figurative drawing, and sculpture. So fortunately, this is within viewpoint, but it is a hybrid piece. It's a little harder to tell in the 2-dimensional image, but it is a mix of sculpture and painting. And he has studied both at the Art Students League in New York City as well as the School of Visual Arts in New York City. And he's currently got one piece in exhibition at the African American Museum in Dallas. It's currently up. It's been up most of this year. And he also recently won the gold medal in 2D at the National Art Museum of Sport in Indianapolis. So those are 2 of his major accomplishments in the last year. So going to the work, I'm going to be discussing the Dance of Freedom and the portrait of Don Francisco de la Robe and his sons Pedro and Domingo. The interesting part about this piece is this is the only work of art in the Walters exhibition that was of America's origin. I don't mean North America, but I mean it is from the Americas. And this will tie in later when I read this, because it is sort of a foreshadowing of what becomes the history after the Renaissance period of the Americas. So this was not, I don't have a specific artist statement from Jules Arthur. He preferred to do it visually. but we've had conversations, so I have curator's notes, which I compiled after talking with him extensively about his piece. So this is my voice, with his consent. Like artists of the Renaissance period, Jules Arthur explores a representational oeuvre in figurative painting rooted in realism, while also paying tribute to historical narrative themes. Gullah Dance of Freedom is a fine example. Arthur's honoring the Gullah people of the Low Country region of South Carolina and Georgia, which includes both the coastal plain and the Sea Islands. The Gullah are African Americans, primarily of West African descent, who developed their own unique and rich cultural heritage preserved through geography, climate, and patterns of importation of enslaved Africans trafficked through Brazil and South Carolina. The Gullah has become a symbol of African American cultural pride. Like the sole piece in the Walters exhibition, Portrait of Don Francesco de Orobe and his sons Pedro and Domingo, which originated in the Americas, it's important to include a piece which foreshadows the story that follows the long 16th century and addresses the 17th century economic expansion into the New World. Our history as Americans is intricately intertwined with the next chapter, following the Renaissance period, which includes the development of the plantation system, slavery, and its spread throughout the New World. So for me, this is a very important piece because it is honoring what came out of the Gullah culture. It's also included Alvin Ailey's dance company, which I'm sure many of you are familiar with. Those are the dancers portrayed, and that was founded as an all African American dance troupe, I believe in the late 60s, and has been going ever since. So it's an American story. And next we go to Nathaniel Donnett. He's from Houston, Texas. He attended Texas Southern University and was recently written up by the press as one of the best in Houston Fine Art Fair about a month and a half ago. So one thing that's very kind of trademark of his artwork is the integration of paper bags. And that is from the Bound Paper Bag Fest. And what he constantly will have a subtext of both racism and colorism addressed in his artwork. Queen Bee and the Bee stands for Been Signing My Own Checks is an artwork that has gotten a lot of attention. I'll first read his statement, and then I'll just add in a few things that he told me when I saw him in Houston about 6 weeks ago that supplement that. So it's in response to the story of the Supper of Emmets, which is this piece created circa 1530 to 1540. The story is an interesting one. Again, this is his voice, let me clarify. Where two disciples speak and eat with Jesus before he vanishes. What isn't seen is a female perspective, yet it is females who saw the angels that initiated the conversations for the disciples to visit Jesus' tomb. In my painting, I am to render a female's perspective, or what I imagine to be a female's perspective, while simultaneously questioning why the women are not depicted. Female empowerment, motherhood, and the idea of the queen are signified through time points. There is an assumption of domesticity regarding the central figure, but it is an illusion. The central figure may not be what the viewer thinks, and the places the viewer in the space to question their assumptions. Queen Bee's head shape is in reference to the Queen Mother sculpture and matriarchs of the Benin in Nigeria. So some supplementary information that he gave me a few weeks ago is this background drawing here is actually a Project Row Houses, which is an immensely successful social program in Houston, Texas. I believe there have been a number of programs that have been launched off that model, and it's based toward women, it's based toward art. It has an empowerment base to it, which has been immensely successful. So he said, although this female figure appears to be subservient initially because she is cleaning, in fact, she's gone full circle. And she is the landowner. She is the landlady, hence the reason the title is that she's been signing her own checks. So it is addressing, again, female empowerment and the absence of female imagery in Renaissance art. And there, again, you see the allegorical overlap of the two tables. And he is, again, questioning where are the women in Renaissance paintings. Lastly, this is Mario Robinson. He is from New Jersey. Unfortunately, his house is in a horrible state after Hurricane Sandy. But he is, sounds okay. He's made it through. But it looks like, from the photos he showed me, that the house is on the beach and the beach is on the house. Yeah, he's had a tough time this week. He is a very well-established and very well-known American realist. He's in his 40s, but he's showing galleries with dead artists that include Wyatt. He really is ranked among sort of the best premier American realists. And his primary medium is watercolor and pastel, We have this piece here called The Novelist, which is kind of an anomaly. It's very rare because it is an oil painting on panel. And really what his artist statement is going to talk about is his interest in portraiture. Okay, and this is Mario Andres Robinson's artist statement. Portraiture. My work celebrates the role of a common man and woman in our society. I view my subjects as royalty. They travail life's pitfalls with an unyielding grace. My compositions are stark and devoid of distractions, therefore offering the viewer an opportunity to fully engage with the subject. Each sitter is highly personal for me, and I paint them within the context of their everyday lives. The African American community is a rich tapestry woven together by shared experiences. My paintings celebrate the people and places which have shaped my life. My hope in this ever-changing world is that we learn to love and respect one another regardless of our differences. So he paints people he knows for the most part, relatives, family members, people who have come into his family's life, or simply people he connects with where he's met along the way. I wanted to tie that in with the idea of portraiture in Renaissance art specifically. So my artist or curator statement for the artist is as follows. During the Renaissance period, portraiture in painting was fertile. Portraiture was painted from life, celebrating individuals instead of adhering to a generalized canon of beauty. In the painting Adorations of the King, which unfortunately we don't have, but it can apply to that one as well, it is clear that the African king and his attendant were painted from life, modeled after real African faces, individuals who were painted in the flesh rather than painted as conventional portraits. Both subjects have a subtext of adornment and symbolism which help the viewer decode the status of the figure, an elaboration and supplement to identity in the painting. Historically, portrait paintings have primarily memorialized the wealthy and powerful, or subjects that represent status in their respective sphere. In contrast, Mario Andres Robinson takes contemporary portraiture to a masterful level with his expertise of medium, his adherence to the time-tested genre of realism, and his sensitivity to the humanism of his subjects. He honors the individual like his Renaissance counterparts and also offers subtle references to identity, whether in the form of adornment or lack thereof, or titling, in this case, the novelist. Robinson bucks the tradition of memorializing the privileged and instead honors personal stories of everyday men and women, oftentimes African American, oftentimes from rural areas. His interest in depicting the natural world mirrors the tradition of portraiture during the Renaissance period. So, I think that's it. Thank you for putting up such a lovely event.
We're going to, I am going to pose a few questions to the artist. We're going to conduct this segment as an open forum, and then we're going to open up the floor so that you can pose questions I know that are burning inside because the work is so intriguing. So basically, we're going to address themes that run throughout both exhibitions, and that is perceptions of Africa, the issue of identity, and the roles that the Africans played in Renaissance society. And that is roles not only as slaves, but roles which enriched the European culture through wealth, their economic wealth that was gained by the Africans, and also the culture that was enriched by the presence of the Africans. So we're going to open the discussion talking about the perceptions of Africa and Africans and the stereotyping based on appearance and behavior, skin color, and also back to the flawed reports by Europeans who in many cases did not visit Africa, but created documents and writings that stereotyped them based on these misbeliefs or misconceptions that they had. So, does anyone want to respond, or should I call on someone first?
I'll say
All right, great. We love a volunteer.
No, I have these obscure facts in my head from reading Myrtis' paintings, but I mean, one thing that I didn't know, and I think I shared this with you on our car ride to DC that day, was that Africans were, I had no idea they were slaves, yes, but they were also doing things like teaching swimming, they were teaching drum lessons, like all these random occupations that they had within the European community that are just never stated. Like the stories, just those kinds of stories just aren't told. Like, you know, a swim instructor, I wouldn't think, or diving, or, you know, dancing and things like that. And then I thought it was interesting. I got this book from I got this. So there's one book out there that's like the Bible, but it's called Black Africans in the European Renaissance, and they take you from one chapter of stereotypes to, you know, in Black and Spanish literature, yada yada. But one interesting thing that I also remembered was the experience of the Africans in Portugal and how conservative the Portuguese were. And so it was kind of the beginning of, I guess, the building of stereotypes, because Africans were just in Portugal being African, which meant they were dancing, they were laughing, they were smiling and all these things. And the Portuguese are very conservative people, so they found their behavior to be offensive when they were just being themselves. And it mirrors, I think, the Black experience in America. I mean, they were calling them lazy and all these things, and it's like, why can't they stop dancing? Why don't they stop making music? Why are they laughing so much? Because everything that the Portuguese did was very, you know, very conservative. So I thought that was interesting because it was like a comedy of errors. No matter what they did, it wasn't the right thing, and it was just exacerbating the situation of them being called savages and being treated differently and being treated like, you know, like they weren't human. So.
I want to jump on.
Amy, that was great. I liked your research. I want to jump into kind of all the artists. Some of you guys made work that was created before this exhibition even started, and I think what's really cool is that there are these commonalities taking place, that the Africans, the descendants, are still dancing and still thinking about where they are and what they're doing here, and still kind of feeling displaced. And I think, jumping on what you brought up, it's a really interesting thing because it's so much in our heart, no matter what we make, whether it be in response specifically to this exhibition or just what comes out of us.
My response to your question, which is just, one of the things that really engaged me with this work, Ethiopia, was that there's a whole lot of experience of, you know, being Black and assumptions that people have about me and of, you know, Black people. So some of the questions I was asking myself and observation was that most of the times Africans or their descendants, whether in Africa or elsewhere, are not attributed with intellect. And through reading the history of the, you know, some of the Africans, even though most of them, even though they were diplomats and so on, and who ruled their own societies successfully, most of them were taken there as slaves, and they also contributed intellectually to even the Renaissance period. And